Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the next podcast brought to you by PM Powered, your consulting company on project, program, and portfolio consulting. I'm Wanda Curley, your authority on project, program, and portfolio items. This podcast today is on government success stories. We hear a lot about it when the government doesn't succeed, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about some programs and projects where they have succeeded. And please forgive me this week because I do have a cold and I'm battling laryngitis, so my throat may give out on me. So again, please bear with me. So let's go over on 4 government programs that drive innovation. And this is was done by Forbes. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about because when we think about entrepreneurs in the commercial environment, in the private sector, and probably the most ultimate one is Steve Jobs, we think that they did it all on their own. And as a matter of fact, they did not. Walter Isaacson noted in his biography that Jobs revolutionized 7 industries and created the most valuable company in the world. We think he's a great man, as we should. But did you know that that Apple was actually created by the government? They're built on things that the government created. So it was chips, the internet, GPS, software protocols were all supported and wholly developed by government programs. So without that, we may have had an Apple, but most likely it would have not been the success that we see now, because he would have had to have used all of his own money and probably would not have had the money that he needed. Bruce Upbin pointed out in a recent article in Forbes that while we like to think daring entrepreneurs and venture capitalists taking all the risks, they are more akin to the last mile, building on top of technological infrastructure built by the public sector. So the government has done it, but they were able to see and envision what this technology could do and take it to the next step that it would meet the public, something that the public would want. So let's talk about 4 programs that the government has. And one of them is DARPA. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard about DARPA. In 1939, Leo Szilard sent a letter to his friend Albert Einstein about the possibility of a mysterious device that could level entire cities, the A-bomb. Einstein in turn passed it on to Franklin Roosevelt, who acutely aware that this otherwise unlikely idea had this sanction of the world's most famous scientists, put the wheels of government in motion. So that was the Manhattan Project. That was probably one of the most wonderful, no, I don't know if it's wonderful, but the best run projects out there. And I would say that it was actually a program, but back then they were called projects. And so in 1958, President Eisenhower authorized DARPA. That was to allow things like the Manhattan Project to continue under the sanctions of the U.S. government. So DARPA has done many things, and we have seen that they've done the internet. The internet was not created by a vice president that we had of the United States, Dan Quayle. It was actually invented by DARPA. It started out as DARPANet. GPS was started by DARPA, and Apple Siri was actually started by DARPA as well. So and they do a lot of development in energy as well. Another one that we have seen a lot and heard a lot from is NIH, the National Institute of Health. We often fall into the trap of thinking about technology as mainly gadgets and gizmos. However, some of the most important innovations happen in life sciences, much of it funded by NIH, a vast effort whose 2014 budget exceeded $31 billion, that's a B, dollars. They've done vaccines, they've done drug studies, they've done the Human Genome Project. So there's a lot of things that NIH has done for us in the field of social sciences and healthcare. Another one that I had not heard of, and maybe some of you have, it's called In-Q-Tel, and this is funded by CIA, believe it or not. It's sort of a VC that invests in startup companies focused on cutting-edge technologies such as big data analytics and quantum computing. So this is something that the CIA sees that it might be something worthwhile for the government, especially in clandestine information, the CIA might fund it in one of their VC programs. Another one is called ZIBR. It's the Small Business Innovation Research. And they help you get your first proof of concept, and they will fund up to $150,000 in money. And the second is a research phase in which they grant up to $1 million. So if you can show that your proof of concept is worthwhile, they will fund up to $1 million afterwards after your proof of concept. And then in the third phase, the company is expected to either get private funding or in some cases can receive funding from another government program. So this is a good thing for small companies that are trying to create technology. So this is a different way that maybe a new Apple could get started, or a new Microsoft, or a new Linux. These are things that can help them find funding. So that's the Small Business Innovation Research. So there's many things that we've seen out there. There's TED Talks and everything where we see a lot of new things are coming about. But these new things need money. And the way we get money is through funding. So it behooves us in the government to fund small capitalistic enterprises so that they can get their feet wet and get going and fund the new next things in technology. Without these incubation systems, we would not have newer technologies. That's how the things that happened that's how the microwave got here. It was based on the Apollo program, and the oven, not the oven, but the cooking stove that has just that stays cool except for where you're heating up. That also got started on the Apollo program. So we got to make sure that we understand that government is very good for incubating great things in the technology area and in the social sciences. So let's make sure that we stay tuned on those and see what else comes from those. So speaking of that, let me talk about 3 different government IT projects that have been successful. The first one is called the Open Source Corporate Management Information System, or OSCMIS. And it's a web-based federal workforce management workflow and administrative software suite with more than 50 applications and tools to manage human resources, training, security, acquisition, and related functions. It was built on Adobe Cold Fusion and Microsoft SQL Server 2005. So you can see this is a little bit dated. I'm sure it's been brought up to a better SQL Server. And this was done totally in-house by the government. So the organization that did it was Defense Information Systems Agency Manpower Personnel and Security Directorate. So that's DISA, Manpower Personnel and Security. The project is Open Source Corporate Management Information System. The challenge was the DISA Manpower Directorate had a number of processes it needed to automate, but it couldn't find a commercial option that did such tasks, or it was limited in doing it, or it was too expensive. So the solution, with a development team of only 7 programmers, can you imagine that? Only 7 programmers, headed by Richard Nelson, led the work to develop more than 50 applications. The agency then put the programs under an open source license, which will allow other organizations to reuse and even improve the software. Can you imagine this? With 7 programmers, they were able to create 50 applications that is doing great things for the government. So it goes to show you that sometimes to do great things, you don't need a huge multi-million-dollar project. You can do it with 7 programmers and using open source and using quite economic tools. So the effect is more than 16,000 military personnel now use the applications. Also, other government agencies are evaluating the application for possible use. The first applications were developed in 2006. In March, DISA signed a cooperative research and development agreement with the open source software Institute to help manage an open source distribution of the software. So my hats off to DISA for doing such a great thing. So let's go to the next one. This is one done in Utah. Let me get there. It was done in Utah. The state's paper request process for public financial information made it difficult to access. So if people wanted to have freedom of information, but for Utah, the Utah Transportation Advisory Board developed a website as an innovative custom application, knowing that data storage and search needed to be optimized. With the new website, anyone can see how Utah spends every taxpayer dollar. That's amazing to me. Every state should have that. They should look at, see what Utah has and see if they can accommodate it for their state. Taxpayers can also easily look for waste, fraud, and abuse in state spending. The launch of this site makes Utah the first state in the nation to require localities to provide expenditure data. So at a project at a glance, it was the Department of Administrative Services, Division of Finance, State of Utah. The project was called the Utah Public Finance Website. The challenge was creating a website to make the finances of public entities in Utah available to citizens. It was a cooperation between Utah's Division of Finance, Department of Technology Services, and Partner Utah Interactive, using open source software and generic and flexible data structures. It just goes to show you that different entities within the government can work together if they put their minds to it. They have to be able to cooperate and understand the end goal to get there. And they have done this. They understood what the end user wanted and needed, and they were able to get there without losing the focus on the end goal. Impact: the initial data available includes Utah revenue expenditure information for the current year. Thousands of visitors have found and downloaded information. The total cost to date is $283,251. So that just goes to show that you could create softwares, web-based systems, and they don't have to be millions of dollars. They can be done at an economic expenditure level. So let's go to the last one. And this one is by advances in an aerial medical evacuation, so this is for the U.S. military, have dramatically improved the overall quality of emergency care for military servicemen and women. So this follows, it's called the DoD's Patient Movement Items Tracking System. So this electronically tracks every piece of equipment that goes from the patient's side in the battlefield all the way to when they get to a hospital. And then it tracks the equipment back into a centralized area. So this tracks and facilitates the recycling of more than 27,000 different items and some $80 million worth of equipment used for medical airlifts. PMITS seamlessly reports real-time information on the operational status and location of patient movement items anywhere in the world. That's amazing to me. Can you imagine being able to track an IV pole or oxygen tanks for all of the individuals that are being medevaced all the time and any place that they are at any one time? So the organization that did this was the Department of Defense Military Health Systems and the Defense Health Services Systems. The project is Patient Moving Items Tracking System. The challenge was to create a system for tracking medical equipment as it accompanies patients from the battlefield to conventional facilities, and to enable a staff to ensure that the needed equipment is available. The patient management movement item tracking system records the location of medical equipment through barcode scanning at each stop. The data is stored in a central database that is available to logisticians via a web interface. Officials say there has not been an instance where medical equipment was unavailable for transport mission. That's amazing. So anytime a patient needed any piece of equipment, the equipment was available because they knew where it was. At the same time, independent analysts estimate that the PMITS system saved at least $6 million per year in inventory management costs alone, duration 2004 to present. So the development cost was $3 million and an annual IT cost of $500,000. So my hat's off to that, to providing the care that our soldiers and sailors need out in the field when they're in harm's way. I hope this has brought to you some ideas on what we can do in the government, and the government can do very well with very little money. It amazes me that when they put the goal is kept in mind and the end users understanding of what they need, and that's kept in mind and kept simple, that we can accomplish anything that we need in the government. It's when these multi-million-dollar projects sometimes get out of hand because we can't keep track of the goal. And hopefully with AI and IoT, that'll become even easier, even for the multi-million and billion-dollar projects. I'm Wanda Curley, your authority on project, program, and portfolio needs. This podcast was brought to you by PM Powered, a consulting company on project, program, and portfolio. Please go to PM Current and follow me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'd love to see you follow me every week. I post my podcasts on Monday. I look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, if you have something that you think that I have not reported correctly or that you would like for me to report, please send me an email at wanda@pmpowered.com. I look forward to seeing you next week, and have a blessed week.